This is Jennifer Foltz. We're here for our second Parent Pep Talk as part of our Parent Education Series, grant funded through the Columbus Foundation. So our Parent Pep Talk today is Understanding Sexual Development. Here with me today is Emily and Matt. Thanks for joining me. And I'm just going to get right into it. So my first question for you is, what is sexual development?
Absolutely. It's always a great question. So hello, everyone. My name is Matt Brittsan. I am a clinical supervisor at Mid-Ohio. And yeah, we're going to talk about sexual development, talk about sex, but sexual development being sometimes a bit of a broad category and could include a lot of different things. When we talk about just development in general, we're talking, socially, how we develop socially, how we develop physically, sexual development obviously being included in there, whether parents like it or not. We are going to develop in sexual ways, but it's not only just our physical changes that occur in our bodies, outside of our bodies, but it's also going to be like the educational and knowledgeable ways that we are going to develop as individuals, the beliefs that we are going to begin to adopt based on how we perceive our world, the education that we receive, all those kinds of things, and then eventually resulting in how the behaviors that we are going to show to those around us, essentially.
Okay, absolutely. So how do parents ask questions about what their child knows, and how do they handle those challenging or difficult questions?
For sure. It's always a shock when your kid comes home and says, "Hey, I learned, this word on the school bus." And that word could range from erection to boner, depending on, the kids that are on that school bus and the kinds of things they're talking about. And as parents or guardians, whatever we are to that kid, we might not always be equipped with the answer. Right? Sometimes we're going to stumble and be like, "Oh, okay, that's a tough question." Or, "Hey, I didn't expect you to come home, from your first day of second grade and be asking me these kinds of things, but here we are." So just being able to kind of like create some normalization, just say, "Hey, thank you for bringing this question to me," right? We don't want to steer the kid away and it's like, "Hey, don't say those words." We want them to know that it's okay. I am a good person to come to and talk about these kinds of things. If you know the answer and it's appropriate for that kid, you feel like you are equipped to deal with it, then go ahead and probably talk about it with your kid. If you're not sure on what they're asking, right? Maybe they're saying, "Hey, all my friends are talking about rizzing up their partner," or something like that. And if you don't know what rizz is, you might need to go talk to your own kid about that answer. But that being an opportunity for saying, "Hey, I don't know, let me look that up for you," or I'll figure that out. We could figure it out together kind of situation. So just an opportunity to even create connection with your kid.
See, I love that. And I love that the emphasis is on building that connection and, learning together throughout the process. Okay, so my next question is, how do parents talk about sexual development with their kids? How do they have the talk?
Yeah, the talk is a challenging one. And I guess before getting into the talk, I think it can be, I know that Emily kind of has some, I guess, perspective on how to almost include more of that connection with your kid in terms of like asking questions. So I'll let her kind of just talk about being able to ask questions to your kid first, and then I'll kind of jump back into the talk area.
Yeah, so I'm Emily. I've been a clinician at MOPS for about, I believe, 3 years at this point. I am almost independently licensed, so we're getting there slowly but surely. So just in terms of thinking about ways to, ask some of these questions, it can be good to even start out very young in terms of using appropriate just names for body parts. Sometimes it might feel uncomfortable for parents, babysitters, any type of guardian to hear like, "Hey, so-and-so just came and hit me in the penis." That might sound kind of strange coming from a 2-year-old or a 2.5-year-old, but it still helps to build that confidence that they do know what their body parts are, which can help in the future if there ever were to be an unsafe situation they know what body parts are and they're able to express that to their supports. It could be something to where even it's like you make it a game. Sometimes it's, I guess, I don't know what I would call it. It's like a pin the tail in the donkey, but it's almost like doing it with like anatomy and just kind of teaching different parts, just almost kind of normalizing it, like, hey, it can be fun to learn about our bodies. It doesn't have to be this really big and scary thing. It might be something to where you hear some really wild things here too. I always like to think of the example of like, hey, this person on the bus just said that babies come out of belly buttons. That's how they're created. That's how they're born. I would probably want to laugh if I heard that at first. And, sometimes I can be very stone-faced. Other times I just burst out laughing, and just even sharing that humor with the kid of like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, I really appreciate you for coming up to me with this question. You've got some of the right ideas, but some of those are, it might not be totally right just yet. How about we talk about it? And then maybe even giving them a little bit more, this will go into consent that we'll talk about later, but just asking if they're okay with having that conversation then, or if they wanted to wait a little bit later, but still knowing that they have to have that conversation at some point. So really praising and validating for asking for support there.
For sure.
I love that. And I think being able to do that also makes it easier for them to come to their parents in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question is, how can parents teach their kids consent?
Yeah, so with consent, kind of going back to just like that ongoing teaching of consent. So, we sometimes will hear of kids that will be like, I really don't want to go to this family reunion. Grandma's always wanting me to kiss her, or she's giving me this big hug, and it just makes me feel uncomfortable. They might not use that type of wording, but we kind of get the gist of it. And just kind of being like, hey, it's okay. You don't have to receive affection that way. So maybe just be like, maybe I could help support you in having a conversation with grandma, or here's something that you can say to grandma to help support you in feeling safer. You could start even when they're younger of asking like, hey, is it okay if I give you a hug now? And then they might say yes, they might say no. And then just kind of seeing if they lean into it. I kind of go back to games a lot just to kind of make learning a little bit more fun. So maybe even having like coloring sheets, you could do it with chalk, balloons, even just any type of fun activity, and kind of doing like almost like a traffic light of teaching like different types of touches. So like red light could be some of the more really bad touches. So, somebody trying to touch their penis on like the playground, be like, hey, this is not okay. None of the other kids should be grabbing you there. That would be a red zone. And then yellow zone, maybe somebody is they're trying to wrestle, and then they kick them in the penis. It's like, hey, well, still not great, a little bit painful, but that intention was still a little bit different. And then maybe a green touch is considered to be a high five, or a different display of affection that they feel okay with. And also kind of teaching them that what might be like a green, yellow, or red in one situation might be very different depending on the person, or just kind of the other variables that are at play there.
See, I love that. And I love the traffic light example that you used, because it really does depend on the person. And I'm sure it can also vary day to day what might be okay. Maybe somebody doesn't want a high five one day and it's fine the next day. So I think that's great, giving them the ability to really think for themselves about how they feel about their body and people touching it. Matt, what are your thoughts on having the talk with your kids?
The talk being depending on probably how you look at it, maybe a fun, challenging time. I think a lot of kind of what Emily and I have shared in terms of being able to talk about those like outlandish things that your kids are going to come with, the questions that you can kind of say, hey, where are you at right now? Kind of trying to feel it out. What does your kid know? Even into that consent area of that might be some times to start considering maybe starting to have the talk, right? This big situation, or at least that's what I think a lot of parents and guardians make it out to be, of this big scary thing, but it doesn't have to be, right? So sex being a normal part of life, something that is going to happen for many, many, many individuals. Oftentimes it's really helpful. Be comfortable with it yourself, right? So yes, if your kid comes to you and says a bunch of crazy words that you don't know, and you're like, whoa, freaking out, take a breath, reorient yourself, become comfortable with it in yourself, and then say, hey, let's talk about this, so that you can kind of continue that really great connection that you already have with your kid. Starting those casual conversations with your child kind of frequently, right? It doesn't have to be this big one and done, I'm going to lock you in the car on the way to basketball practice kind of thing, and we're going to talk it out. It could just be, yeah, you know what, we're going to talk about this for the next couple months every weekend or something like that. So turning it into kind of a casual thing. It doesn't have to be this big ordeal. In the previous pep talk that Kim Blair did, she talked about modeling emotions for your kids. And so the same can be held true here of, modeling what the talk looks like in terms of, hey, you've seen me, hug your aunt or your uncle or your mom or your dad kind of situation, and that leading into that talk kind of thing, right? You've already started to model some of these really healthy behaviors, these behaviors that are, going to be age appropriate depending on your kid and the stage of life that they're at. Those kinds of things. It's helpful to begin to show all that to your kid, so that they can understand. It's like, oh, I can do those kinds of things. And then, when it gets into those bigger questions, it's less scary to them. And it's a little bit informal, but still educational at the same time.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that children are much more receptive when it is a casual conversations, multiple of them, instead of just one, locking you in the car on the way to practice.
Yes.
So what is what is appropriate versus what is problematic?
And with that one, it kind of goes back to depending on, situations. So we think back to when they're younger, a lot of times, parents might be very concerned, like, oh my goodness, my kid keeps touching themselves all the time, like their hands always down their pants. There must be something wrong. And it doesn't always have to mean there's something wrong. When we think about potty training, kids are trying to figure out, how do all these parts work? How do I know when I, have to go to the bathroom versus I don't? Or, just as puberty kind of continues to happen, there might be itchy, for a lack of better terms there too. And just kind of trying to figure out, like, I don't know how to cope with this feeling. This doesn't, necessarily feel comfortable. So kind of just teaching them of, like, there kind of is a place and time for a lot of these things. It's one thing to go do it into, like the bedroom or in the bathroom, as compared to pulling your pants down on the playground and other people, being around there. Also kind of going back to privacy too. A lot of times parents like, oh, I don't know what they're doing in their room. They must be doing all these horrible things in there. They need to have their door open or unlocked at all times. Having some privacy is a good thing. We need to have some of that alone time for ourselves. And also, there's things I wouldn't want to walk in on. I'd rather them have the door locked and be like, hey, come back in 10 minutes. That would probably be better, having that conversation rather than having that awkward walking in on somebody, or even somebody feeling potentially unsafe in their private spaces.
Absolutely. I know privacy was a big deal for me when I was a teenager and still is now. So how do parents know when something is problematic?
Yeah. For sure. To build, I guess, off of kind of what Emily's talking about is the problematic behaviors where it is becoming almost like disruptive, right? They can't focus on another task or another behavior because they're so focused on the sexual behavior. So, if they're potentially, while privacy is important and a good thing, but if it is, locking themselves in their room for several hours at a time, and eventually we kind of talk and coax out, okay, this is what's going on in there. Maybe we need to have some more conversations about whatever's going on behind that closed door. And then, so talking about where it is going to exclude other activities, right? The kid can't be redirected towards something else. It's like, nope, I'm focused on my body part, and that's all I can be focused on right now. Where it would cause somebody or the child themselves some emotional or physical injury, pain, whatever it may be. Any kind of physical aggression, right? Where we are noticing actual aggression towards other people, aggression being, verbally, physically, those kinds of things. Not just I'm angry because of XYZ. Aggression kind of keys it up, takes it to that next level. Anger is normal. Aggression is, where we are getting into that hostile aspect of things. And then any coercion or force where it is going to be, involving somebody else. And finally, probably looking into where the child or adolescent is really simulating any kind of penetrative or like adult sexual act where it is, okay, this is, this is getting into that realm of, I don't think we talked about this. I'm curious where you learned this, or that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So I think that these are such hard questions that I asked you, Emily and Matt, and I think that you guys did it with ease. So thank you both so much for meeting with me. And thank you again to the Columbus Foundation, whose grant funding made this parent education series possible. We have a lot more resources, so we will link our series page with this video. But thanks, everyone.